Great. All right. Well, welcome everyone to my presentation on using GIS to manage a tribal land base. My name is Eric Anderson. I work at the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe as their GIS analyst. Muckleshoot, as you can kind of see in that map there, is in the Seattle-Tacoma area up in western Washington. Fairly small and urban reservation. This is my first NTLA conference, and what better way to jump in than to just give a presentation on my job. So first I wanted to ask how many people out here know what GIS is or use GIS at their tribe or at their employer? Okay, great. Yeah, these past couple of days I've been seeing there's a lot of interest in GIS at the tribe, so that's great to see. But for clarity though, GIS stands for Geographic Information Science or Systems, which is essentially the collection, analysis, and visualization of geographic data, usually on some sort of a map. And so today I'll be demonstrating how the Muckleshoot tribe uses GIS on a daily basis and how I maintain it. There will be time for questions at the end, but if you really have a pressing question, just feel free to raise your hand at some point. Okay, so the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe, as I said, it's in the Seattle-Tacoma metro area, about 30 miles south of Seattle, 15 miles east of Tacoma in King County. Again, a fairly small but urban reservation. There are about 3,300 enrolled tribal members, 80% of whom live within a 20-mile radius of the reservation. As far as area goes, it's about 6.13 square miles, which is 6 different square mile sections, and then an additional eighth of a square mile that was added later as the tribal school was rebuilt about 10, 15 years ago. And as was the case for all other reservations, it went through an allotment period, and today it's resulted in there being a combination of Indian-owned trust land, fee land, and then non-Indian lands as well. About 2,300 acres of trust land on reservation, and about 1,640 acres of fee land on reservation. And then there's also trust and fee lands off reservation, most notably 100,000 acres or so of forest land that the tribe used its commercial enterprise money to purchase out east in the Cascade Mountain Range. And then the tribe continues to acquire and develop new land, which is facilitated by our realty department, and develop that new land for commercial enterprises such as tribal housing and so forth. So I wanted to dedicate a little time to give you an overview in our trust services department, which is probably similar to many of yours at home. Our mission is simple. We provide local assistance to the tribe, tribal members, and trust landowners on issues that arise with the BIA or the BTFA. I want to make a point to mention that Muckleshoot is 638 compacted for realty. Some of our essential services are assisting lessees and obtaining a lease on trust land, which involves ordering surveys and appraisals and getting them approved by the BIA. Same thing with right-of-ways and service line agreements. We assist landowners also with gifting their trust land or consolidating it, whatever is in their best interest. We also have a thorough estate planning and probate process where we order Indian land inventories and draft services through an outside attorney, as well as help family members file for Indian probate of a loved one's estate. And then where I start to come in, the management of Muckleshoot lands, specifically the electronic database management, which requires our department being educated about the land in order to preserve it for its future. So that's great and all, but why does it really need GIS? Well, like I mentioned, Muckleshoot invests greatly in residential infrastructure, devotes a lot of time and money to it, probably more than the average Washington tribe does. And as such, legal documents are constantly passing through our department. More infrastructure means more surveys are ordered, more easements, so that means more documents. And part of my job is to make my boss's life as easy as possible by encoding pretty much all of that into GIS and providing her with maps to facilitate the process, make it easy to get things approved and whatnot. But not only do we work with the BIA, we work with other governments, we work with other audiences, and notably we work with community members directly. We have tribal members walk into our department asking for different services, as well as other entities like private surveyors and 911, et cetera. And so this presents an extra challenge we have to be cautious about, and that's in the presentation of our data. Some information might be more sensitive to one group than it might be to another, like a tribal member versus the BIA, for example, or vice versa. And so GIS allows me to maintain multiple iterations of the same piece piece of data to help guide whatever the conversation needs to be in that particular case. And above all, I want to make sure our department is upheld to a good reputation. So managing all this overwhelming amounts of literature requires, in my opinion, a spatial database, not just a database, because we want to assign space and place to our work, because the concept of space and place is really what it's all about. We want to make sure that it's protected by law for our tribal members and citizens. It's immensely important. And I should have bolded this even more, but we want to be the regionally authoritative data source. It's very important to us. And by that, I mean we want other jurisdictions, even if they're overlapping Muckleshoot's reservation. So for example, the city of Auburn, the north half of the reservation is within the city limits. We would still like Auburn to ask us for an address point or a utility line or something, just so that they're recognizing our sovereignty in the area. And that requires having a complete, comprehensive GIS database. So now, what do I use to manage all of this? And other presentations have talked about this. I'm just going to touch upon it briefly. So within the Bureau of Indian Affairs is the branch of Geospatial Support, or BOGS, and they authorize tribes and tribal employees to enter agreements to receive GIS software, licenses, and other training. The supplier of all this is Esri, which is considered the principal supplier of desktop GIS software in the industry. They offer many products. They all have the ArcGIS brand name in front of them. And the three major ones that Muckleshoot uses, as well as most organizations, are ArcGIS Pro, Online, and Enterprise. So ArcGIS Pro is the desktop application. This is what you download and install into your computer. It's a versatile sandbox of all things geospatial analysis related or entering data. And then you have ArcGIS Online, which is not desktop-based, but it's web-based. So this is where users create accounts and share and collaborate all kinds of geospatial information. And then finally, ArcGIS Enterprise is the same concept, but it's typically held in-house with your own security, your own network. And so there's a higher cost for infrastructure, but this is what organizations typically use to share data within their organization. And again, in regards to tribes getting access, I'll just refer you to the link I have down there, but also the Esri exhibition booth out there. They'll give you all kinds of information you need to know about acquiring this opportunity. Okay, so in a moment, I'm going to show you what ArcGIS Enterprise looks like from a regular Muckleshoot employee's perspective. ArcGIS Enterprise is our GIS. It's the system that holds our information, and my responsibility as a GIS analyst is to manage and manipulate that information, decide how it's presented, and to digress real quick, this is one of the reasons I really like GIS, because not only is it geographic information science, but it also blends artistic components together. It's very logical how it's all organized within the database, but then to bring that to life requires an artistic touch. And I've always been sort of a left brain, right brain person, and I like doing both things. So that's why GIS really speaks to me. So ArcGIS Enterprise has a component called Portal. Portal is the user interface for users to interact with the data. It opens via a web browser. It is accessed by all of our employees, and that's how they create, edit, and pull information from outside. I also want to emphasize that users are assigned different permission levels. So even though I might upload one data set, there are many ways to give certain users certain roles to not edit that data or to maybe look at just a specific part of that data. So just because you upload one data set doesn't mean everyone has all their eyes on it all at the same exact time. So now I'm going to go here and give a little demonstration. And click some buttons to make sure it shows up. Okay, so this is our landing page for Portal. This is accessible via web browser, like I said. And so I always ask employees to bookmark this so they have easy access. And on this landing page, it shows a few web apps that I've created for different purposes, depending on what the employee wants. What I'm going to demonstrate today partially because I have a very dodgy VPN access and don't want to mess anything up. I'm going to present our main operations web app, which is the most comprehensive one, serves the most purposes. It is essentially our realty and cadastral layers and our utility layers, as well as some other reference layers like contour lines, King County tax parcels, et cetera. So yeah, this might look a little overwhelming at first. Over here, if you can see my mouse, this is the 100,000 or so acres of forest land I was mentioning earlier that we've purchased in the past 10 or so years. But in terms of the interface here, you have on the left the layer list. So every checkbox here you see represents something that's appearing on the map. And as you zoom in and you zoom out, you can see different ones appear and disappear to help aid the viewing. And you can turn these layers on and off as you wish. There are other ways to observe the information. You can open up the legend if the VPN allows for it, but you all probably know what a legend looks like. There's a base map gallery if you're interested in not just looking at an aerial view, but maybe you want to look at terrain or topographic view. So I want to also point out the main thing that tribal members and employees like to use here is just the simple search tool. So I have it set up where you can search for a tribal member's name, an allotment ID, address, document number, and what you do, you type in something that you want. And in this case, I'm going to type in NTLA demo as my person, because that is the hypothetical I set up today. And you click on it, and what it does is it identifies a feature in your data set that matches your query, and it directs you immediately to it. And this is what really opens employees' eyes to, wow, I can use this in my department. Another way of doing this actually is towards the bottom of the screen here, you can open up the attribute table, the information that defines what you're seeing on the map, the blues and the yellows and the pinks. And when you open this up and you navigate to your data set of interest, you can click on any of the rows and it takes you immediately to that property. So just a super interactive environment. Also want to mention, again, you can click on these parcels yourself or these address points, and it opens up this nice label, this nice pop-up where you can check out the acreage, check out land value, any other information that I and my department has agreed that is relevant to share out with other employees. So I'm going to go back to this NTLA demo individual. And so, again, we use this on a regular basis, and very, very frequently we'll have a tribal member come in. And so the hypothetical I'm going to set up is person named NTLA demo, has a question about her lease. Maybe the neighbor is clearing some vegetation and she thinks it's on her land, and she wants to ask us, okay, I'd like a copy of my lease. I'd like to see the provisions in it. I'd like to see my lot boundaries. And so typically my director is the first one who interacts with this person. She can instantly go to this map. She can click on the lease in question after searching the individual's name and get some basic info about the lease. The lease number would appear there if it was an active lease. Notice it's about a 1/4 acre. It's on allotment 31, the 31st lot in this new subdivision. And you can open up any document associated with it, including the lease. In this case, I put a lease modification just to show that you can add anything that you'd like. And my boss can print this out for whoever walks in. She could ask me to make a map that is nicer in appearance than just a screenshot of the operations web application. And then the tribal member can be on their way and feeling hopefully satisfied that we did the job correctly. So that's just one of thousands of different examples that has come across the tribe in the past several years as we've had this database. And for users who are maybe a little unclear on this, I do have a link here that opens up a user guide, allows them to learn it themselves, or they can ask me questions. And so I've always encouraged them to reach out to me. And we are always constantly adding employees from different departments into the user pool of people who are accessing this. So yeah, that's our operations map. I also want to point out, if I can here, the VPN allows me. So we also have department-specific web apps, and I wanted to show this one, the landscaping one. So our general maintenance director asked me if I knew how to calculate the acreages of different lawns and flower beds across the reservation for trimming every year during the warm months. And so I went looked through the list that I was provided, created some shapes around the lawns, and gave acreages, square footage, and different information specific to this project. And that helped the general maintenance director bid out the landscaping duties and provided a clean way for him to look through what properties need to be landscaped at any given time. And none of the landscaping crew uses GIS, so all that I really needed to do was provide an attachment for a PDF for those people to take out into the field and look at as they're landscaping. So GIS has capabilities for those who are just looking at more analog ways of taking care of their job, or more digital, more advanced ways actually taking equipment out in the field. So that's one, again, of thousands of different potential ways to have a department-specific map, depending on the needs of the director. All right, back to this. So none of this happens overnight. I want to touch upon how our GIS at Muckleshoot evolved over time. So up until roughly the early 2010s, Muckleshoot had no real GIS. Land records and maps were, on file in the records room. They were sporadically downloaded on different computers, but there was no linking like there was today. Then early 2010s, the wildlife and fisheries departments first acquired some single user GIS software, so they were doing their own analysis for environmental sciences. But nothing, again, was really linked. They were downloading their own data individually. And then approximately 2016, our GIS administrator helped us get introduced to ArcGIS Online, which was a big step in helping the tribe acquire what is very similar to what I just showed you. This is also when Trust Services first hired a dedicated GIS consultant to encode all of the information on TSRs, all of the information pertaining to our land base, and that took several months to do, put it into our GIS. I also want to mention we have a public works department that did something very similar. They hired a GIS consultant to use institutional knowledge on public utilities around the tribe that are managed by public works, as well as going out and finding existing utilities. And so they created their own utilities database, just like how we have our parcel database. And then a few years later, we upgraded to ArcGIS Enterprise. We expanded the number of licenses, the number of users, and we began to do more actual field work and take GPS out, collect data in real time, and have it synchronized to our organization. And ever since then, it's really been just refining that, making it more sophisticated, integrating it into other departments like the landscaping stuff that I showed you a moment ago. I've spent a lot of time reviewing all those old encoded land boundaries from the TSRs to make sure there are no discrepancies, added different tools in the web operations web map that I showed you a moment ago. And we're just continuing to do that more and more, and conferences like this give me another opportunity to see how we can improve our information even more. So I'm going to spend a few slides now mentioning some of the steps that a tribe will go through after they've acquired all their software, things to populate their GIS. I keep mentioning this word digitizing, or at least I hope I've used the word digitizing. And this is, again, encoding something that's on paper into an electronic format. And in ArcGIS Pro, the desktop application, you're able to do this with ease. You can type in more or less the meets and bounds description, and it will plant those points onto a map to the real Earth so that you can navigate around like you would in Google Maps. Another way of digitizing, and I like this because, again, of that blending of arts and sciences, is called georeferencing or georectifying. And this is basically taking a PDF, and just slapping it onto the screen. And I like this because it can combine a kind of a complicated schematic onto familiar territory. And so the example you're seeing there is a proposed culvert replacement project at an intersection on the reservation. And I just basically colorized the points of interest. In particular, the green would be the temporary construction easements. And not only does this give them a good visualization, whoever is involved in the project, but these green areas would likely be the areas defined in a BIA-approved construction easement. And so I've already got the basis set up if this project were to go through. So that's digitization in a nutshell. And as I've alluded to, you can attach the original paper document into the GIS as well. So you still have the electronic and the print formats married to one another for reference, like with the lease example I showed you in that hypothetical. So another thing that you'll want to do instead of just, this wrong side, you want to take advantage of local public GIS data that's already been made available by another organization. So a lot of this stuff already exists, you know, like a roads data set might already exist. You don't have to redraw the roads. Likely it has been supplied by another organization like some state department. And in Washington, we have the Geospatial Open Data Portal. This is a way to access some basic info like roads or cities and urban areas. And the cool thing about this is that you don't have to just download a static copy to your computer. You can link it into your ArcGIS Enterprise environment. And this means that you don't have to update the data yourself. The other department is still the custodian, but when they update it, you will see that update at the same time. And when I mentioned the early days of our wildlife department having their own GIS licenses, they were constantly downloading imagery from 2010, 2011, 2012, over and over again, filling up, cluttering their computers, doing potentially slightly different analyses on their different devices. This would eliminate it. Your GIS is a central data repository for everything. So some examples that Muckleshoot uses that are valuable to us. The King County tax parcel data. This is for if we want to compare what we believe is the boundary of, say, an allotment and how that overlays with the tax parcel boundaries that King County is holding. The Bureau of Land Management's public land survey system data for historical reference and finding survey monuments. The City of Auburn, which, as I mentioned, overlaps the tribe a little bit. Their utilities data, they do water and sewer for the north half, and we control our water and sewer in the southern half. Pull in their data, and as it gets updated, we will see it, new fire hydrant, et cetera. And then also the BIA's own bogs data. So we are actually able to pull in what the BIA is holding for our allotment information in their spatial database. And this is an excellent way for me to not only locate parcels that are not Muckleshoot, that we might not be familiar with just on a common knowledge basis, but it also allows me to see, is the BIA holding our information correctly in their home territory. And then you'll also want to eventually create your own data in the field to confirm the accuracy of existing data or just to create your own for your own projects. I didn't want to include a cliche stock photo, so you have a picture of me from last summer as I was walking the fence line of a tribal member who was concerned that there was an electric fence being installed by the neighbor on her property. And long story short, I determined there was a little bit of encroachment, and I gave the landowner a map saying, you can talk to your neighbor about this. And ultimately, the neighbor did remove it because we, again, take pride in having very robust and accurate data to show that we're correct. This is, again, the tribe expressing its sovereignty. Other examples, locating different roads across the reservation, markers, utility structures. And then, again, new data sets, new projects like code enforcement violations. There's some cars parked on the cul-de-sac. I can go out and take a geographical point and attach a picture to that point and have that on record. New building footprints, if a new property having a home built on it. Also, and I've talked to some people about this already, plotting different cemeteries, going out with a GPS unit and taking some information on the headstones and presenting that to tribal council or whoever inside the organization is interested in seeing that and sharing that. I keep saying GPS unit. I'm not going to go into the specifics of the equipment, but at the tribe we use Trimble R2 and R10 units, which capture satellite signal and give you very high accuracy down to the inch or a couple inches of where you are on the planet, which is required if you're trying to find appropriate survey boundaries. So for this next part of the presentation, doing good on time, I want to invite you into a day in the life of us at the Trust Services Department in the Phillips Starr Administration Building. Because at this point I've described kind of what GIS is, who, what, when, where, why, how. But I really just want to bring you into many different stories that have come up in the year and a half that I've been there, and some of the work that I have produced based on those stories. What are examples that have aided the operations of a tribe, and how have they made tribal members more knowledgeable about their lands? So my hope is that you'll be even more convinced, based on this, that GIS is essential for tribal self-governance, self-determination, and the retaining of land rights. So in a moment, you're going to see some examples that emphasize, first, the emotional and educational appeal to tribal members, maps that open their eyes to something that no one else would probably show them. Simplifying complex maps to bridge the communication gap between parties like the county and tribal members, or an engineer and landowners of a new subdivision, or who are getting homes built on a new subdivision. Fulfilling requests from other departments and from tribal council. So my work is not just limited to trust services. We ask all other departments to come to us if they have a request. And also importantly, lending credibility to the tribe and the tribe's arguments. We want to have a voice in conversations that impact our land and land adjacent to it. And all of these encompass this last bullet point, which is just putting Muckleshoot's logo on maps in a consistent professional format is pretty empowering for us, and it gives us credibility around the other organizations, jurisdictions that we deal with. So get into the examples. I really like this one. So I've been doing this a lot more recently because it's become more popular. I make land interest maps for different tribal employees. So, you know, the ITI reports, the TSRs, they're so blech to look at. They're not really well understood by the ordinary tribal members. So what I do is I bring that to life, and I go through it myself using my knowledge as a trust services employee, find the townships they're in, find the sections, and actually locate that parcel, and then present a series of maps here that showcases where all the surface and mineral rights are owned. And so in this particular case, this woman inherited a lot of land from, I believe, her mom's side, Colville Reservation, Nez Perce, and she was very, very overjoyed to receive this, and that's why I included this example. On the left side, you're seeing kind of the table of contents page, and then on the right side here, my mouse isn't showing up, but on the right side, you're seeing the specific parcels, the percentage owned, how many acres it is, what the allotment number is. And so this gives me an opportunity to present information about historical surveying, allotting, and it's just a really nice visual. It connects these tribal members to their ancestors whom they inherited the land from. In addition to paper maps, I also produce what is called a KMZ file, which you can open up in Google Earth, and this is essentially the same deal, but now you can fly around. Fly is the term they use, not me. That you can fly around their properties. Oh, this one is on this road by St. Joseph Church out yonder. So they like this too, those who request to have this interactive format. There we go. Another thing I've done is create time-lapse maps, including the one you see here. This is in the area of our former tribal school, which is now converted to mainly just a ball field, youth area, and some administration buildings. I was asked to make this because some folks in the language cultural division were wondering where potentially some old artifacts were coming from, and they wanted to see some of the old buildings that have been here since as early as 1936, which was that first grayscale picture you saw, up until the present day. And so this also brings back some nostalgia for tribal members seeing their land, how it was used many, many years ago, and how it's changed since then. We keep a variety of historical reservation maps on hand. These maps usually have the GIS data layered over top of an original survey, like you see on the left here. We actually use this in our annual report for trust services, and then we give it out to different tribal members for educational purposes. But not only is it educational, on the right side of the screen is a very similar map, but we put this together to try to figure out where there were some disputed land rights along a river parcel. So the White River crosses through much of Muckleshoot, and it's meandered quite a bit since 150 years ago when the first surveys and treaties were put forth. And there had come into question in the top left corner of that right side map who owned some of the land, who was being assessed taxes. And so we actually spoke with folks at the BIA, or I guess BLM, in King County to try to get that figured out and to confirm that the court decision that reaffirmed the tribe's original land as according to the original survey was still being upheld. So GIS allowed me to dive into this a little bit more deeply than another tribe might. Simple high-resolution maps. This is probably the most frequent thing I do. Tribal member comes in, hey, I want to see my house. Or maybe I want to see the access easement to my house, as you're seeing on the left side of the screen there. We have drones that we fly occasionally over different populated areas to get an even finer degree of clarity in the picture. And sometimes I go an extra mile. I put together what is called an oblique view. So this is not just looking at the map straight down, but it's looking at it from an angle to give some 3 dimensions to it. And so this allotment here on the right is where hopefully someone's potentially elder home is going to be next to their family's land. They just wanted to get another sense of what it looked like. And even something as simple as this, they probably haven't really even thought about what it looks like from the air. So very simple, but very effective. In the simplifying complex maps area, the main thing that I do here is I translate site plans and exhibits into more legible maps. In particular for landowner meetings, when the landowners are deciding who is receiving which lot on a new subdivision that the tribe has approved to be built. We want to reduce the amount of confusion at these meetings, not create more questions. We want to answer them. There's already enough confusion as it is. These designs evolve over time. So as you can see on the left, I mean, we had already changed where roughly the lots were going to be. So I keep multiple iterations in case we need to revert back. And this is all easy to do in the GIS system. Another example, this is a more complex example because there are different tribal government trust properties, individual tribal member trust properties, and fee property. And so we want to understand in this example where utility lines are going to be laid, which parcels is it going to go over, where are the lots going to be distributed to. And this particular project has many entities involved. So the highway in the northeast corner there is going to be expanded probably by the Department of Transportation. You have utility lines like natural gas coming from a nearby city that is likely going to come in. And then contracting with different construction companies to put the roads in and ultimately the homes and all the infrastructure. So the site plan we were provided on the right, or excuse me, on the left, a little dark, a little hard to read, kind of make it more vibrant. And a third example, so we endeavor to provide high-speed internet, Comcast internet to our tribal members when possible. And this is an example of, I created a 10-foot buffer around a proposed line for high-speed internet. And this map ultimately made it into the approved right-of-way granting construction of this. So on occasion, I'll use tools within ArcGIS to modernize older generic computer maps from other governments, like this one from the city of Auburn. So the story behind this is the city of Auburn, which I've mentioned multiple times now, crosses into the reservation, the city limits do. They wanted to activate a new water pump station, which is the little blue dot on the map that my cursor is not showing you. But the city of Auburn and the local utility company failed to realize the amount of power that was going to be needed to operate this new station. And so Muckleshoot, being a good neighbor, said, hey, we will allow you to connect to some of our own utilities, our own electricity. This is a good example of jurisdictions working together. But for my part, I created the map on the right to highlight Muckleshoot specific things for the council to more easily see, and focus on the area of interest and not just use the government map that was provided to us in some of the emails. And this is also an example of using external data, because that green area, I did not draw that. I just brought it in from the city of Auburn's GIS infrastructure. Another similar thing, we had King County approach us to replace some culverts along the north boundary of one of our reservation sections. They wanted to know if we had any planned improvement projects on the docket. And so this kind of made us realize again that some of the areas you're seeing in pink there are very wet. The ditches get very overflowed. There is a protected wetland there next to the new subdivision you're seeing on the left side of the screen. So we did a little bit more investigating now that this came to our attention. I went out with a ground penetrating radar unit, located some of the culverts that were in one of the areas of interest, which is on the right side here, and saw that there is a lot of unmaintained and broken garbage stuff there, and it is not allowing water to flow very well, and it's flooding the local horse pasture when it's very rainy, which it's raining out in Washington a lot, in case you didn't know about that, and flooding some homes, or not, the home's yard around the home. And so we passed this information on to planning and fisheries, and just an example of us using GIS to further elucidate a situation like this, and notice that the off-reservation culverts, they're fine, but on-reservation, not so much. Is it suspicious? We don't know, but we're happy to work with King County to produce some good results, and my map here, I believe, helps that. So the beauty of digitizing in GIS is that you're able to stitch together multiple surveys, and in this, with pinpoint accuracy. And in this case, there were two separately platted neighborhoods that had very minutely different corners, and technically speaking, it created a gap in some of the subdivided trust parcels of the original allotment. And is this really that critical? I mean, sure, yes, no, you could argue, but using GIS, we were able to identify this, where using two different print maps that you assume the corners are the same might not show you. So we're working on getting title restored to this tiny parcel. We'll see where it goes. Okay, the request from other departments section. So as I mentioned, I do a lot of GPS field data collection. This one example here is the building maintenance director asking me to help identify a good potential location for an electric gate to block public traffic and allow tribal members to access the river that is to the east of that map there. Make sure that it's on trust land. This is by that weird wonky riverbed parcel that I was telling you about a few minutes ago. On the right side of the screen, a different project. The local, one of the tribe's fish hatcheries was worried that a shed was being built on their operations area. And so we went out with a GPS device. I took points of the concrete slab that the shed was situated on, overlaid our easement data when I got back to the office, and belayed the fears a little bit by showing that the Army Corps of Engineers has an easement here. They're allowed to build here. All is good. And I did this within a day. And that's the other thing, too, I forgot to mention. I will wake up in the morning and not know that I'm going to do this. So we'll get a call from somebody at 9 o'clock. And by the afternoon, we could be out there. We can get the situation handled. We don't have to keep the fears and the tensions high when it comes to potential trespassing or boundary disputes. So that's another great benefit of having GIS in our department. I've mentioned we have drones, we fly overhead. This is a housing subdivision, 60-unit, I believe, housing subdivision that was funded via grant by HUD for $10 million, I forget which now. But the housing director, one of the housing directors that wanted to have a consistent series of maps showing the progress of the subdivision. And so I provided that in this case. This was last November. And by the way, this housing development is for sober living. So for transitioning, recovering addicts and tribal members who are going to move into a alcohol-free environment. I've mentioned that the tribe acquires property frequently. Our realty director helps out with the land acquisition, and he often asks me to make a map to show if this is a viable property for the tribe to own, whether that's to have buffer from the reservation or to have potential development to happen onto it. So in this case, I provided some elevation and contour information to show that, yeah, this is a fairly buildable area, and there are no established watersheds or wetlands on the property. So I do this sort of map frequently to help our realty director figure out what vacant land to purchase. Another project we did recently, debris cleanup. So the Public Works Director asked me to identify the location of some organic debris piles on some gravel property that we've acquired on the reservation. And he wants to create this, this system where we are not just depositing randomly on the gravel, but moving it to a more natural earth pit that is more depressed to not potentially mess with the non-Indian owned land that is directly to the west. For example, they have a wood chipper that crushes some of the debris, and they're concerned about it impacting land that isn't Muckleshoots. So I went out with GPS to mark the boundaries, kind of give an approximate acreage. And then we went out there last week, actually, and you see the old location has been cleaned up, and they're now filling in the new section. But the Public Works Director was just especially interested in knowing where the reservation boundary was, as that dictated how the project was going to go. The tribe offers many services to members that live within a specific distance of the reservation. They depend upon the service. So for example, tribal members wishing to apply for a home loan, which fixes mortgage payments at 1%, they can live within a 30-mile radius of the tribe. I've mentioned landscaping services. You have to live within 10 miles of the reservation to get that service. So for these departments, I will make reference maps. The one on the right is a basic template. And then I will also make maps specific to a home. On the left side of the screen, this particular house was within the radius, the 30-mile radius. So we said, okay, if they want a home loan, they can get it. And also to use as the center of the circle, we use a stone chimney that is a relic from Muckleshoot Community Center that was burnt down many, many years ago. And then finally, so this was a very recent thing I put in, exclusions map packet. So by exclusions, I mean folks who are disallowed from being on the reservation for various reasons. We had our legal department and the King County Department of Corrections asking for a kind of clear map to show where the reservation boundary was, where the roads along the boundaries were, where the county line was, and where the highway that runs through the reservation was, to show to people, hey, you can't go here, or you can go here. And so in addition to that, we provided printout maps to give, ordinary printout maps to give to these folks to explain where the reservation boundary is with clarity. And this topic has come up a lot more recently because there is a home near the reservation that allegedly is harboring sex offenders. And so it's stirring some commotion in the community, and we want to do everything in our power to keep the community safe. And these maps, I believe, support that. Okay, lending credibility to the tribe. So this is a very, 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 very big one. We address our new subdivisions and any new homes that are built or any new facilities. We follow the King County Handbook for addressing, and then once we get those addresses approved, we submit them to the County Department of Assessments, Google Maps, the Postal Service, anyone who uses addressing information. And I spent extra time to make sure that these addresses are entering all platforms because, for example, some tribal members were using Apple Maps and were not getting navigated to their homes that they would have been in Google Maps. So I tried to make it a point with Apple Maps and the mapping platforms that support Apple Maps to get those addresses in to make sure there are no emergency debacles and make sure Amazon delivery drivers can get to their home. So it's unusual for addressing to be done by a tribe or not a city or an engineer of a subdivision. So we're allowed to bend the rules a little bit. We have to name some roads based on numbers in the county, so 392nd Street, 400th Street, along a grid. But for more complex roads, like within the subdivision on the left here, we allow tribal members to name the roads. And so they'll name them typically an elder or a historical allotee's name. In this case, we had King George, named after, I believe, Henry King George, and then Buckslaw Court, which is also the name of an influential elder. This helps young people learn their ancestry, and they can say, I grew up on my great-grandfather's road. So it's important that we do this. And this map on the left is something that I present to the construction department so that they get on board with it, and we help establish mailbox regions. We set up central mailbox units to most effectively serve the occupants there. They don't have to walk as far, while also making it super efficient as possible for the post office to drop mail off. In addition, appraisal maps are something that we do on our own as a 638 compacted tribe. We ask an appraiser to evaluate the land using the maps that I create, like the one on the left side. With a non-complete or non-existent GIS, this would not be possible for us to do. It streamlines the evaluation process and allows the appraiser to compare land to similar land on Zillow or Redfin without the constant back and forth from the BIA. That's kind of the emphasis there. And these maps will also make it occasionally into environmental assessment reports, which just show that the tribe is the one who supplied the information, not someone else. And this is another appraisal map example where the teal shaded area is the buildable area, and it's on a very sloped property that leads to the river, the White River that I've talked about. Fee to trust process, the tribe engages in this, and I provide the maps to show which parcels are trying to be put into trust in relation to other trust parcels that are existing. In this case, many times I'm creating maps to help them figure out an issue that's not lining up with all of the different documents and titles that are associated with getting the fee into trust. So on the right side of the screen, this particular instance, we had a property we wanted to potentially buy, convert to trust. We were not, or the fee to trust folks were not certain about the boundary because there was a boundary line adjustment not shown up on every document. And so I created a map showing them that it was partitioned, moved around a little bit. So GIS helped create a level of immersion for them that would not have otherwise been possible. I also feel strongly about mentioning this. The work that our department did last year to request property tax exemption for Muckleshoot fee parcels that were eligible. For many years, we were being assessed taxes that, number one, we shouldn't have been because of tribal rules in the Washington Code, as well as exemption requests we had made in the past that were not being followed through because of poor communication on the King County and Department of Revenue's part. So long story short, we spent many, many months going through many different spreadsheets, and I created all these types of maps to really show, hey, this is our parcel that we own. It's adjacent to the reservation boundary. That's one of the requirements. Here's the legal description. We've got the deed. We've got the application. Here you go. Please accept our exemption. Please approve it. And ultimately, last year, the tribe was able to be refunded nearly $500,000 from property tax that should not have been assessed in the first place. And that creates now a relationship going forward to make sure that we are not going to fall into this trap again. And by the way, this year, we've almost already completed our exemption process. Just a few parcels we needed to get exempt for the 2024 year. So I wanted to point that out, as GIS was instrumental in getting this situation resolved. So this is another kind of fun one. As you all know, public domain trust parcel is not associated with a particular tribe. They can quite easily get lost in translation. And I want to just share this example, and I need to make sure I get it right here. A Muckleshoot tribal member who had I believe husband passed away, saw on his probate documents that there was this parcel in orange that you're seeing on the screen there. She asked us what the parcel was. We didn't know, so we dug into GIS and we found it. And doing more research, we realized that this was put into trust in 1918 by a Yakima Indian who died later, and his wife then inhabited the property for 22 odd years while the probate decision was being delayed. And in this 22-year time frame, the wife did a quitclaim deed to a non-Indian landowner, and you probably get the picture. It went into other people's hands, and eventually the county went through county foreclosure, subdivided into 2 lots. And now there's 2 homes on a property that really should have one home that is owned in common by a multitude of different Indians, particularly Muckleshoot members. So GIS kind of dug this back up. The BIA has been keeping record of it all the time, but they don't have the same sort of desire to learn about this parcel. So there are now obvious legal grounds to do something about it if we so wish, and these maps help to make that happen if we so desire. Muckleshoot's GIS also proved its worth in this project. A landowner had been cutting down some trees and some branches along the property line. They were using the parcel viewer in King County's Department of Assessments page to say this is the boundary line, but that's not necessarily right, because again, we're the authoritative data source. I know, as the GIS analyst, I know I'm putting the lines in the right spot. That's where the survey monument is. That's what the title status report says. So we were able to furnish this evidence to the police. BIA forester came out. I made some remarks on where the trees were brought down, where the monument actually is, took a picture of it. And the other cool thing, I was able to turn the clock back and show where the tree actually sat the year prior. So on the right side of the screen, you're seeing a LiDAR enhanced image. King County had provided a LiDAR data set for the area, which essentially creates a 3D representation of the earth below them. And I was able to calculate exactly how tall the tree was, which helped the forester figure out proper value for the lost wood. So in conclusion, you can see Trust Services keeps quite busy, and GIS is integral to all the work that we do. Without the GIS infrastructure we have, we would not be able to do all these amazing things that I've just presented to you, and we'd be limited in our services to tribal members that they deserve. We'd be more reliant on outside help. We would not be a partner, we'd be just more of a user of other people's data. And there's a certain expectation of accuracy in our technologically advanced 21st century, and we want to be on par with everyone else. So again, my key takeaway for everyone is that ownership of GIS data is essential for self-governance in our century. We want to be the regional authoritative data source. We want to arm the tribe with knowledge if there is an issue going on with their land. GIS also, as I mentioned, revitalizes the tribal land base. It opens up tribal members' eyes to different things going on the reservation. And engages multiple audiences, as you have seen, for tribal members and landowners. It brings an asset of theirs to life in a 3D space. For tribal employees and executives, it's management of their assets, doing some analysis, figure out where they can continue to build on the reservation. And for other community members, it's simply, GIS is simply a medium for them to learn about the reservation in an interactive environment. And lastly, GIS is available for you and waiting. Starting small is not incredibly costly, and you will have a lot of technical support, a lot of support by regional and national tribal GIS groups, which will be happy to help out with any aspect because they've been through this process before as well. So that wraps it up. I want to thank you all for being a great audience. Last thing I'd encourage you to do is to jot down my contact info and to take a look at our Muckleshoot public web map that we provide to the public. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask away. Yeah. I'm sorry?
Doing a lot of different types of work.
Yeah, so our trust services department is 4 individuals. Our director, we have a realty specialist, a records specialist, and then myself.
Thank you, Eric. Not really a question, but just wanted to piggyback on what you said because this is a fantastic presentation. You've made some really good maps. My name is Robert Weber. I'm out of Division of Energy and Mineral Development in Denver, and we have a GIS software product for those reservations that have oil and gas interests primarily. We're getting into renewables as well, aggregates. You can map those. It's an out-of-the-box type GIS program, so you don't have to go through Esri. We get you the license. We work through bogs. It's totally free to the tribes and the agencies that support them. So if you're interested in an alternative to Esri, let me know. I'll be in the area all day, and we'll get you a free demo online. The software is free, the support is free, the training. So we have a GIS guy on staff as well. You probably know him, Brad Tatham. No? Yeah.
Hi.
And just fantastic support, and we're getting new tribes installed all the time. We've been in business 15, 20 years now. So, like I said, come see me and I'll give you my card. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much.